I've known plenty of artists over the years who've been intimidated by the shading process, and so they avoid anything approaching realism, and that leaves them limited. But what if I told you there was a special skill you could unlock to make shading look effortless? Tell me you wouldn't jump on that. Now, if you follow my steps to unlock this skill, shading will become very easy, so make sure you pay close attention. Now, to kick this off, I'm sure you've heard of line work, but have you ever heard of shadow work? Probably not, because it's a name that I made up to define the technique I'm going to share with you guys. It's a technique that depends heavily on the knowledge of shadow shapes, which will be familiar to you if you're not new to my channel. Now, how does this process work? Well, at this stage, you want to get a rough sketch of what the pose is going to be, and you want to use thick marks to do so. Now, the reason for that is because it helps you to avoid getting too precise too soon and getting caught up in details. And all you want to do at this stage is get a rough approximation of what the pose is going to be that you can then work with. Now, your sketch is going to reach a point where, while not refined, it'll be developed enough for you to start introducing your shadows into it. And when you do so, you want to look primarily at the core shadows, because those are going to be some of the best indicators of volume and how these larger forms are turning. Now, what you might notice about the early process of my drawing is that I'm not really using a rough mannequin or any basic shapes really. I'm just getting right into it in a rough fashion. And the reason for that primarily is that a lot of that work is being done in my imagination. Like, even though you don't see those basic shapes on the canvas, it doesn't mean that they're not in my mind's eye. It doesn't mean I'm not projecting those images onto my canvas. So that's one. And two is that a lot of the marks that I'm laying down are the most essential ones for me to be able to triangulate other important things. Now, you might be wondering, how am I even able to do something like this? And I'll explain that to you in a moment. But first, I want you to understand what the benefits are of an approach like this. Now, when it comes to the shadow work process, what I'm doing is I'm combining the benefits of multiple stages into one cohesive stage. Now, what most people will do is they will do a sketch phase, which may or may not have multiple passes, then a line work phase, which may also have multiple passes, and then a value phase, which may also have multiple passes. But with the shadow work process, I'm combining all of those into one cohesive step, which allows me to save a lot of time. That in and of itself has plenty of benefits. For example, let's say I'm working on a character design or an illustration. Because I'm able to go through all of those stages much more quickly, I'm able to save time by testing out more ideas more efficiently. So maybe instead of spending 5 hours polishing one idea, maybe it only takes me 1 hour with this process, and I can test out 5 different ideas and find a better one. Now, the cool thing about this process is that while you are avoiding details, since you're refining your shadows over time, the details will just reveal themselves to you over time. So even though I'm not targeting details, what will happen is, because I'm so determined to refine my shadows, the details will just emerge from my shadow work. Now, I'm going to explain to you how you can unlock this skill for yourself so that you can make shading very easy for you. But if you want everything you need wrapped into one cohesive package, you can grab the guide below the video. It goes very in-depth into everything you need, so make sure you don't miss out on that. Now, in order for you to unlock this skill, it helps for you to know what the nature of drawing actually is. And at a base level, drawing is simply the process of making good decisions. So for example, you make the decision to lay down a mark. If it was a good decision, you keep it. If it wasn't, you erase it, you readjust it, do whatever you have to do to make it into a good decision. And a successful drawing is simply one where you've made many more good decisions than bad decisions. Now, bad ones can work, but that's not what you want to aim for. So when you see me drawing with very minimal construction or mannequin involved, that's because I've gotten good enough at making good decisions without that additional aid. So then the question becomes, how do I get good at making good decisions in drawing? And it comes down to ultimately understanding. I've mentioned this before, but drawing is merely the demonstration of how much you've understood reality. This is why you can draw literally every day and never get better. That's because drawing is not merely drawing. This is why practice only makes perfect if you perfect your practice. Otherwise, you will fall into the trap of needless repetition and you will never get anywhere. So step 1, you want to draw with the goal of understanding so that you become sensitive to the building blocks of reality. This means when you look at a person, any person, you're able to identify what their rhythm is, what the basic building blocks are in terms of basic shapes, and so on. And you want this to become relatively second nature, and you do this by becoming really observant. Make it a point to be observant. Which brings me to step 2, which is, please, for the love of God, use reference. You will not gain a greater understanding of reality by drawing from imagination. If anything, you run the risk of internalizing bad habits, especially if you're a beginner. So avoid that if possible. Step 3, utilize the Bargue Method whenever possible. Now, I've spoken about this before, but I believe that this is one of the best methods for learning how to perceive reality for what it actually is, especially when you want to identify the silhouette and the shadow shapes of your figure or subject. It's another reason to grab my guide below this video, where I go even deeper into how this method works. And my shadow work technique is basically an offshoot of the Bargue Method, so you may want to consider that method to be a prerequisite to learning how I shade so easily. Now, after you like and subscribe below, you can catch the next video right here if you need more tips, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.